Hey team, welcome back to the show. Today is Coach Andrea and I talking through how much should the scale go up in a building phase. So here we're just answering a listener question. Shout out to Carrie, my client Carrie, absolute legend. But the question was, if you want to build muscle but stay at maintenance and keep lean, how much should you expect the scale to go up? Now, really, like almost everyone is quite nervous about weight gain when they're transitioning from a first successful fat loss phase into a lean building phase. So, in today's episode, I just want to break down how much weight you should expect to gain, when you might want to actually be gaining quicker than you are, or when you might need to pull back. But before we get into it, Andrea, what has been going on with you this week? Anything to update us on?
Uh, so last week we always talk through my photo shoot prep progress in this fat loss phase, and last week things were sticky. I just kind of held for the week after like recovering from being sick and everything. And so calories came down this week, and so far seeing a good trend down. It's like very early on. I only got that switched over. Uh, I made an adjustment Monday after I got the feedback to drop that down, but I wasn't like I had already eaten half my day's food, so I was fully into it Tuesday. Today's Thursday, so but I'm down like 3 pounds from where I kept holding last
Yeah.
week because I like just the scale kept creeping up last week. Um, but from my previous low, I'm down another pound. So things are moving well. We added a fifth cardio day, and I got my photo shoot scheduled. So that's in 8 weeks. 8 weeks from tomorrow, I think. So I'm feeling good. I feel like I'm definitely going to be ready for it. All I have to do is lose like a pound a week, which I
Yeah.
think I'm probably going to exceed based on
Oh,
how
yeah.
things have been going.
I'm excited to see the result of that too. It's cool to see how much muscle you built and how it's really hanging around as you've kind of gotten leaner here. So
Yeah, it
good.
makes me excited to do the next build phase.
Yeah.
Because really, I
You're,
haven't spent that much time building. Like a year is not that much time.
how long will you guys have been dieting for by the end of this, by your photo shoot?
It's forever, it feels like. So how Brittany, my coach, structured it was there was initial health phase, which was kind of like a super mild deficit coming out of the surplus. So food or like glycogen and inflammation and food volume drops, and so you'll see a scale reduction. And then I got started officially in the fat loss phase in like early November, I think. So November, December, January, February, March, 5 months.
Pretty good chunk of time. About
Yeah.
20 weeks. Okay. I feel like most pushes to get like shredded, typically, even when you're starting in a pretty lean place, end up being at least like 16 to 20 weeks,
Yeah.
I would say. So, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm really excited to see the end result of that. Um, on my end, really not a lot new for me. What weight mini cut continues to go well. I'm down to like hovering between like 218 and 220. So down a pretty good clip. Brought calories up a little bit this week. Just didn't want to continue to lose as quickly as I have been losing like a 3, 4 pounds on a week per average. Since we're getting like a little bit deeper
It's
into the
crazy
phase, I'm
fast.
starting to get a lot leaner. I just don't want to potentially lose muscle tissue and training performance is starting to suffer, and protecting that's normally like our top priority. But yeah, past that on my end, really not a lot to report on.
How
Are
much longer do
you
you have?
like 3.5 weeks basically?
Okay.
Yeah.
Not much time at all.
Which I think I'll be in a pretty good place by then, honestly. I'm up for sure. I've forgotten a lot leaner. I'm for
Yeah.
sure like already pretty lean. I'm happy with how my progress pictures looked. Big visual difference, I feel like, just in like the last 4 weeks, and those like ones I put up side by side on Instagram yesterday. And that was
Yeah, for
actually
sure.
from like those were actually from like 5 or 6 days ago as well. I just hadn't got around to taking any around since then. But since I am a little bit leaner since then still. But yeah, it's gone really well.
Yeah. It'll be cool to see the final product.
Absolutely. All right. So again, today we're answering the question: if you want to build muscle but stay at maintenance and stay lean, how much should you expect the scale to go up? And again, this is a really common concern. especially for those who want to optimize their physique while avoiding unwanted fat gain. Now, I think what we were just discussing there with my own fat loss phase is important to remember as well, right? Where the first time you've gotten lean, especially if it's been like such a challenging thing for you to do in the past and it's like this epic journey to get there, it can like be so daunting to like I have to go through all that again to get there. Where really I think the more you work through these phases of nutrition properly, the easier it becomes to just not be as worried about it. Like, what if I do lose a little bit of fat? Or what if I do gain a little bit of body fat? First, like your body composition year round will stay in a much better place than it has in the past. So it's a lot easier to get back to your leanest. But secondly, again, like when we manage all these things properly, it's not hard to get back to where you were, right? Like for me, like it's been 4 weeks of dieting. And again, I have lost very aggressively, but it hasn't been hard. Um, and I'm back to like the leanest I have been. I mean, since I did my photo shoot, I would say basically in 2022, like the end of 2022. So it's just something to keep in mind here as well. Um, but basically, when we're looking at like how your weight shifts, because typically what this transition looks like, if we're transitioning into a lean building phase, a lot of times we're coming off the end of a fat loss phase. So there's first typically like a transition to maintenance from fat loss. Now there, I typically tell people to expect to gain about 2 to 3% of their body weight in the reverse diet. This doesn't have to be body fat. It shouldn't be body fat in this case, but we will see you literally just have more food in your gut because you're eating more food. We have more carbs stored as muscle glycogen. I think for what every gram of carbohydrate is stored as muscle glycogen in your muscle, there's like 3 grams of water that carb soaks up. So that accounts for more weight. So those things do equate to us being slightly heavier than we were at the end of fat loss. Again, not body fat that we gained, but expecting about a 2 to 3% increase is pretty feasible. So for example, if you were a 100-pound person, just to make this easy, probably by the end of the reverse, we would more realistically expect it to be somewhere between 102 and 103. Would you agree with all that?
Yeah, and I'll also add, just because I find that this is an expectation that people have going in that's unmet, is you're also not going to feel quite as lean as you were at the end of the fat loss phase.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean you've added fat. It just
Yeah.
means that now you have food in your stomach and your glycogen stores are filled out and you have more body water. And that makes you look and feel just a little bit softer to yourself, who is nitpicking yourself, probably not to anybody else. But that's completely normal and doesn't mean that you've added body fat.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's important too to like don't get fixated on trying to maintain like your end of diet weight.
The
Because if you go
exact
through a
weight.
reverse diet properly, yeah, if you go through a reverse diet properly, you shouldn't. As I was saying, if you reverse diet, you shouldn't expect to stay at that exact same body weight, right? We should see the scale come up a couple pounds. We want your training performance to be better. We want to refill your muscle glycogen stores. Your muscles will look more jacked. You'll be able to train better. So don't, just as you said, like you might not look quite as lean. That's okay. Similarly, like don't be too focused on like if I deviate a single pound from this weight, like I'm losing progress. That's not at all the case. Anything else you would add there?
No.
Okay. So let's then talk about understanding the relationship between muscle gain and scale weight. Because even if we are building at maintenance, like we're talking about in this question, we probably will see some weight gain because adding muscle mass to your frame means adding weight to your frame via muscle mass. So we're literally adding more tissue to your frame when you are adding muscle mass. And basically we are adding more weight via muscle mass to your frame, right? Muscle isn't weightless. This will equate to more muscle, also meaning there is more room for more muscle glycogen to be stored. So I mentioned before, like 1 gram of carbs, basically glycogen, aka carbs stored intramuscularly, will also soak up some water. So because of that, we will again be holding more muscle glycogen and we can see some weight gain because of that. So again, adding weight isn't necessarily a bad thing or something to be afraid of. And then also when we're building muscle, muscle is denser than fat, right? People say like what muscle weighs more than fat or something like that, which I mean, 1 pound of muscle weighs the same as 1 pound of fat. I don't, but I think what they're trying to say is like per the amount of space that it takes up,
Yeah.
muscle will be proportionally heavier than fat. So yes, muscle is denser than fat, but takes up less space. Similarly, we post a ton of like same weight client transformations, and you can look leaner while weighing the same or more due to building more muscle and having less fat. Like I just posted my client Phil yesterday. Over the last couple of years, what we've done, where at the same weight, he looks way leaner. You can see his abs so much more now. His shoulders are so much broader. He's built a lot of tissue, but he is the same weight. So just a couple reasons why we need to not be overly fixated on just like where's the weight at. And also, we don't need to be focused on trying to maintain the same scale weight. Even if the goal is building at maintenance, if we are adding muscle tissue, we probably should see that scale slowly creeping up. We'll get into that a little bit more in just a moment. Anything else you would add there before we continue?
That's why I love those same weight comparisons so much, because I think it's helpful for people to see, to get out of their head about the exact number on the scale. Natalie put one up this morning that was really cool. I just ripped hers right off and did the exact same thing. So it's just like my very favorite thing to show people and to look at, because it is really easy to get caught up in that scale weight. Like, oh my gosh, this is the highest number I've ever seen. Okay,
Oh, yeah.
but does that actually mean that you look worse? No, it's leading you to what you ultimately want.
Yeah, you have to look at your progress pictures, your body measurements as well. And like comparing, like Phil, he just wrapped up. We built for like a good year. We just are about to wrap up a mini cut. And so he's at a lower weight than we have been for quite a while. And again, like, damn, it's cool to see where he's at now versus where we
Mm-hmm.
were, like where we're at the same weight 2 years ago. So digging into then how much weight should you expect to gain in a lean building phase? There are a couple variables here to consider. And here we're talking about building at maintenance. I would say maybe we'll get into the nuances of that. So first, one thing to consider is what's your training experience and how much muscle do you already have? So beginners and or those with not much muscle, I would say really those with 0 to about 12ish months exposure to a proper training stimulus can typically gain 1 to 2 pounds of muscle per month. I would say like 2 is probably pushing it. I'd say that's like not gonna happen that many months, even if you are like very new to this. Um, but the exposure to a proper training stimulus is also very important because I think that like probably 95% of clients when they start coaching think like I've been training really well and I've like experienced proper hypertrophy training before. I would say probably like 5% of clients actually have. So almost everyone, a lot more people are still like technically in this beginner stage. Not just the amount of time you spend in the gym, but how long have we truly been doing everything well here? A lot more people are in the beginner stage than they think. Um, so they are capable of building muscle a good bit quicker. I would say like for that person, somewhere between that, if we have the variables dialed in, which is also very important. We get to the point where we're training hard, and this is like once we're really good at training hard and executing well, which also takes time. Um, we're managing our nutrition well. We're not in like an aggressive deficit. We're managing our sleep well, our life stress well. Gaining 1 to 2 pounds of muscle per month should be realistic for a good stretch of time. But I will also say this same person is typically a very good candidate for body recomposition, where a lot of times this person will like get leaner. We might have them in like a slight deficit at the same time. So they don't often see the scale climb all that much at all. We just see like progress pictures, body measurements, things like that shifting more. On the flip side, intermediate clientele, those with a decent amount of muscle, and let's say like 9 to 12 plus months of exposure to a proper training stimulus, a more realistic rate of muscle gain might be closer to zero point 0.5 to 1 pounds of muscle per month. And this is again when our variables like sleep and nutrition are dialed in. And for this person, it's going to be a lot more important that we're not in a deficit. I would say, like for that individual, if we are in a deficit, hey, we've truly been doing everything well for a good stretch of time in the training front. It's a lot less likely that we're going to build all that much muscle in this deficit phase. So that's an important variable here. And then oftentimes, I mean, to build, Ideally, once we are getting into this intermediate stage, honestly, I wouldn't personally, like if the goal is improving our body composition the most over the next like 2 years, for example, I wouldn't personally be so focused on, I want to keep my weight the same and just build up maintenance. Like once you're to this point and you are a little bit more like intermediate, dude, we need to kind of pull every lever we can to optimize your ability to add tissue. And at this point, this is where I would probably recommend, hey, let's just go into like a slight surplus. We by no means need to gain like excess body fat. We're not going to intentionally push body fat up. Might gain a few pounds of body fat over a fat loss or a building phase done well. But typically, like the amount of body fat someone would gain in a building phase, if we manage it well, again, we can like get back to where you were again with my example with like a 3 to 4 week mini cut. Like it's not that much, but you build so much muscle during that time that like if the goal is to make the most progress over the next few years, I just think it's worth it. Like again, if you're carrying like 3 4 pounds of extra body fat, it's even like 6 pounds extra body fat for a few months, but we are able to gain exponentially more muscle because of it, and then we can pull that off really quickly. I just think it makes sense. I really don't. I think like we're so fixated on like trying to stay lean once you get to the intermediate stage. And again, it's like not, it's like splitting hairs to anyone's eyes except for your own with like how lean you are versus how lean you would stay. But it will have a larger impact on your progress.
Yeah,
But
that's how people get caught just sort of spinning their wheels for a long time. They're like, well, I did this whenever I started and it was working so well. And then you just try and maintain that leanness. But now, like, you're aged out of that ability to progress like that anymore without that surplus. And it's just trying to stay at maintenance when you're trying to build is such a fine tightrope to walk
yeah,
where some days you're going to end up in a deficit because you moved around a little more. Some days you might be at maintenance. Some days you might be in a slight surplus. But those days where you're at maintenance or a little bit below, you're just not going to have the fuel or just the fuel to make sure that you're maximizing muscle protein synthesis, making sure that you are building as much muscle as you possibly can. And that's such a slow process already. We really want to like hammer down on the gas pedal as much as possible. And you can only build so fast. So neither of us are saying you need a 500 to 800 calorie surplus in a day. You just want to make sure that you're not dipping into a deficit.
yeah, I would realistically like, hey, we're probably going to aim for like 100 to, I'm thinking of like Carrie's case here. She's someone, she trains really, really hard. She trains really well. She's a boss. She's pretty lean already. Wants to continue to build more muscle. She has a decent amount of muscle already though also. So for her, like, again, we could build up maintenance. Just her understanding and accepting it's going to be a lot slower process. I also though, like, biggest thing in like an instance like hers is like, if she was someone where I was having to tell her all the time, like, dude, you're not training hard enough. We've got to improve this. I would be a lot more likely to lean into this. Whereas like she is someone where again, like that's just slight surplus. I'm a lot more confident that really like we wouldn't see her gaining much body fat at all. She would just be able to build tissue more quickly. But ultimately, like it's in this hypothetical situation would be up to her. But again, if we are going to be like, hey, we are going to be in a slight surplus, I would say it's more likely that, hey, we're probably going to gain closer to like, let's say 1 to 1.5, maybe even 2 pounds the occasional month. On average, it'll probably come out to something like 1 to 1.5 pounds gain on average per month. But then when we're looking at, let's say that hypothetically, this more intermediate client did decide, hey, I'm okay with things moving slower. I do just want to build that maintenance. If we're starting from a lean position, which again, like in the context of this question, I'm assuming she's like thinking about this after our fat loss phase that we're in right now, then we will be starting from a lean position. She's already very lean, getting leaner still. We're not in a place for you to recomp, right? We're not in a good place for her to like, I'm going to be able to continue to lose body fat and build muscle. We should really only be like, I'm not going to want her to get leaner past that point. Like we still have a good like 6 to 8 weeks left in our fat loss phase. I'm not going to want her to get leaner than that. If the goal is to build. So realistically, we shouldn't be losing body fat. So thus, if we are building muscle, which means we're adding weight to our frame via muscle mass, probably should still see the scales slowly coming up. Now, I would say realistically here, we're probably looking at like on average, maybe closer to like a half pound. Maybe there's like a month here or there where we're gaining like 1 pound per month, but realistically, it's probably close to like a half pound on average per month. But again, we should see it slowly moving up there. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. That's what I always tell my clients, and the verbiage that you and Natalie used on that training mindset podcast of like your training being the thing that pushes the scale up has been really helpful too, with that mindset shift for people.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think that's huge. I really like that also. So, when it comes down to understanding if you're gaining too quickly or slowly, a couple things we're looking at. First is training effort. So, if I have a client who's just not training hard, it's like, dude, we still have like 3, 4, 5 reps in the tank, which again, very common feedback. Don't be offended if you get it. We're not training hard. We're missing the stimulus to be building muscle. As you said, Andrea, you said it perfectly. Your training effort is the thing that's driving the scale up. If that training effort is missing and we're gaining, okay, we're probably not gaining muscle tissue here. So I probably want to pull this person back a bit. From a training progression perspective, which is another important variable I'm looking at as like, am I okay with this person gaining or not? What are you looking for there?
We should be progressing in the gym most of the time. I don't want anybody to get caught up in worrying that they might not be progressing or maybe they're adding fat or whatever if you don't see either the reps or the weight going up every single week. But I would say most weeks of the month you should see things progressing and shouldn't have a stall in any of your key lifts for more than like 3 weeks or so. That doesn't include things like lateral raises, rear delt flies, like things like that, where it's just very, very normal to not see progression for a long time. That doesn't mean you're not
Oh, yeah.
progressing with it. But that aside, you also want to look at training quality. So, have you gotten a lot better at engaging the muscle, controlling, really like squeezing the muscle for all it's worth throughout the entire rep rather than just like getting through the movement and moving it from point A to B? That all matters too. And so don't get too hung up on like being worried if you don't progress every single time, but we should see over the long term that trend is upward in your strength. And that's like that's the consequence of building muscle, not necessarily the thing that drives muscle growth. They work hand in hand. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I feel like we've talked about that a lot on the podcast the last couple of weeks, like progressive overload being the result of.
Mm-hmm.
Progressive overload is the adaptation, not the stimulus we're applying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that's huge. Like someone's logbook progressions are probably their effort and their logbook progressions are the biggest thing that I'm looking at. Where if both those are in a good place, I'm very confident this person's building muscle and I'm okay with things going up alongside how their progress picture is looking. Which, when we're building muscle, a couple things we can look at. Are we potentially seeing like more clear? Now, also, there are a lot of variables that will impact this. Like if we're gaining a little bit of body fat at the same time, we might not see all these things. But in the perfect world where we were just adding muscle and not getting body fat, if someone was gaining muscle, we'd be able to see, okay, there's probably improvements in the glute to waist ratio. Their shoulder to waist ratio has also improved. There's more of a V taper. From like the side shot, their glutes probably protrude further back. We can see differences in progress pictures at the same weight, like we talked about earlier with, hey, at the same weight, this person has more ab definition, more visible delts, more quad separation, less body fat on their glutes, more definition in their upper back, or they may even have like those upper pec striations, for example. And then body measurements kind of go hand in hand. Like when we're looking at muscle gain, the chest measurement will typically tell us, like a lot of times when a lot of clients, a lot of women we coach, I would say typically haven't trained their back a lot or very well in the past. So a lot of times we will be able to make some really, really solid lat gains, which everybody loves. But that will equate to your chest measurement increasing because we're measuring around like your trunk. And so we're also measuring your lats. Bicep, of course, measurement will go up a bit as your arms get bigger. This is one that's really, even like adding a quarter inch, like the smaller a muscle group is, like the larger, like a quarter inch increases relative to that, right? Like you adding a quarter inch to your legs when we're looking at like your quads, your adductors, and your hamstrings are basically what we were measuring the circumference of. That's not nearly as impressive as like adding a quarter inch to like your bicep measurement. That's a very, very large increase. So I would say like this isn't normally one that increases a crazy amount, but a lot of times even like if we're like in a recomp phase and this is staying the same, we can tell like, oh, you have a lot less body fat in your arms and your biceps are looking a lot more jacked. Um, the hips and glutes will also be one that I'm looking at here. Now in a building phase, increases here could be muscle gain or they could be fat gain. A lot of women like the hips and glutes will be one of the hips and thighs. I'm saying hips and glutes if they're not like more or less the same thing. Hips and thighs will be one of the first places you'll gain body fat. So we need to look at like, okay, are your movements relative to like your glutes? Are we seeing you get stronger there consistently? Our progress pictures looking, does it look like we're getting body fat there, or like your glutes just looking more lifted, for example? So we can kind of tease that out. But that's normally what I'm looking at as far as body measurements. Anything else to add there?
This depends on people's body fat storage patterns, of course, but most of the time, if we see, for example, like the hips and the thighs go up, but the waist measurement stay the same, that's a really good, and they're getting stronger in their lower body, that's a really good indicator that they're building muscle, because that waist measurement, it's kind of like lower than most people's lats, higher than digestive fluctuations, and so it kind of is a good one to look at for body fat.
Oh,
And
for sure.
then with like those striations and things like that, that's also for most people going to be something that you'll see more in the next fat loss phase, honestly.
Yeah.
Because even if you're staying really lean, you're going to add just enough body fat to not be able to see those visual changes. And so it's really like a delayed gratification practice.
Yeah. A lot of the visuals, a lot of times it's more so like when we're looking at someone gaining weight, is it like it depends again. But like when we're talking to a more intermediate client, not this like beginner who's experiencing a lot of recomp, but a more intermediate, a lot of times in that building phase, it is less like, wow, you look way more shredded. And then it's a lot
Yeah.
more like, okay, I'm seeing like your weight going up. We're seeing you get stronger. Now I'm looking at progress pictures to make sure we're not seeing things like deteriorate rather than, oh, wow, there's a huge improvement. Like you have way more chest striations than you did 2 weeks ago, for example.
Yeah.
Okay. When we're talking about biofeedback, what are you typically looking for there?
Biofeedback should mostly just be in a pretty good, steady place. So women should have consistent menstrual cycles. So they should more or less be the same length month to month. There's gonna, I wouldn't freak out if every once in a while, especially if there's like other stuff that's stressful going on in life, if you have like a longer or shorter cycle, but for the most part, they should be pretty consistent, not super painful or anything like that. Um, you should have pretty good energy. Like it's normal to get tired at the end of the day, but as long as things are managed pretty well, you should have pretty good, consistent energy throughout the day. Sleep should be pretty good. That one is also really heavily influenced by things like stress and caffeine. So assuming those things are managed well, your sleep should be pretty solid. And then hunger wise, you should have a little bit of hunger leading into your meals, but you shouldn't have that like gnawing deep belly pain hunger whenever you're not like getting ready to eat your next meal.
Sounds like you have like a worm or something. Yeah, I think all that's pretty spot on. Okay. I wouldn't add anything there, honestly. Hunger is a big one that I'm looking for. Of course, your
Yeah.
menstrual cycle. Your sleep is very important. And this is one, like none of this, like the best training program, you nailing your nutrition, you deprioritizing sleep or not making it enough of a priority really has such a big negative impact on everything else that you're doing well.
Yeah.
That's a lot of times like one of the hardest things I think, honestly, for people to dial in. It's like, dude, we're sleeping 6 hours on average per night. Like, why are you confused about? Are you really confused about why your training doesn't feel good and why you're struggling to progress this last week? That's a very common conversation I have.
Yeah.
So that's so huge for all this. When it comes to weight, again, we're generally not going to be that. We've talked a lot about like rates of gain you can expect, but we're ultimately not that focused on the scale. As long as the logbook is progressing, hunger is low, training performance and perceived recovery are good. But again, we will likely see it trending up a little bit over time. But there are a few important considerations on things that might skew the scale data that you're seeing. So first, inflammation can cause the scale to spike up a lot. So soreness from training. Like for example, this week actually, I started a new training program. Now, I've been a lot more sore from this because I have a lot of new movements, a lot of novel movements, a lot of movements I'm stoked to get back to, like my hack squat. Been doing a Smith machine squat for forever. I'm so glad to be back to hacks now. But my entire lower body is just so sore. We got a brand new gym, which is so
Yeah, I was gonna
sick, by
say
the way.
some new machines too.
I can't believe I didn't mention that our gym is
That's a big update.
Shout out to Fit Lab. I truly think it is the best gym that I have ever been in. It's so cool. And the aesthetic of it is so cool too. I was talking to Brandon, the owner, about that. And I was like, dude, I so appreciate how it's like, they have like nice, like, it's like basically wood, like basically the colors of my door behind me, a little bit darker, like what is it, like an oak? Anyways, like we don't really get into the little wall panel thing. It is oak, yes. Like they have like a nice like oak wood tones and then like black and then like it's just like whereas like for some reason I feel like people who are like big equipment nerds normally they get like their gyms are like all their equipment they get like orange or like that like lime green. It's like why do we have to do this? So
yeah, we've got lime green in my gym.
I don't know why it's such a thing. It's like anyway, so I so appreciate the aesthetic where it's like just anyways, but it's such a sick gym. But yes, that has made me way more sore. Something I see a lot actually as well for clients, you'll see someone's progress pictures and it's like, damn, dude, you got a hella bad sunburn this last weekend. That will cause inflammation. The scale will be a little bit higher. Changes in food selection can be big variables here. So if you had more sodium the day before, more carbs. I have like my training day, rest day macros. Like after a training day, my weight is always higher than after a rest day because I eat more on my training days than my rest days. If we ate more food volume, if we ate later than normal, those will all impact the scale. If you're about to start your menstrual cycle, a lot of clients, almost all clients that I work with, I feel like the like week of their cycle will almost always see the scale go up. So
and ovulation.
And ovulation as well. Yeah, so it's really kind of just like
we get 2 normal weeks a month.
Yes, basically. I do really like I think Lyle McDonald calls it an anchor week, where it's like basically just comparing like this week of your cycle to the same week last month. That is kind of our best way to gauge progress. I really like that concept.
Yeah.
Anything else to add before we wrap it up here?
I don't think so. The sunburn thing was a crazy thing for me to learn early on. Whenever I started coaching, I had somebody that like was just like full body sunburned and her weight was way up and I was like, whoa, that makes so much sense, but I never thought about it before.
Oh yeah, it is wild. I'm also amazed at the amount of people who are like get sunburns consistently. I feel like I'm so once we went like floating the river and I was laying on my stomach on a tube the entire time and I like forgot to put sunscreen on my calves. Which I think is actually why my calves won't grow now. It just killed
radiation.
Yeah, it killed all my myonuclei or whatever. No, but I just got like such a bad burn that my calves were like blistering. And then ever since then, I'm like, never again am I getting sunburned, which I've done a pretty good job. I don't think I've ever once in Arizona gotten a sunburn. Anyways, that is what we have for you all for today. As always, thank you guys for tuning in. If you'd like to apply for coaching, hit the link in our show notes, not your show notes, our show notes. There's ours and yours mutually. And we will catch you guys soon.